Hey guys, it's me, and I'm laying on my bed, and I'm editing this video right now. But throughout the entire video while I'm editing, I noticed that I was so quiet and so offbeat. So I apologize if my energy seems really down. I just have to be quiet because people are snoozing in my household. But don't worry, everything's cool. I'm just a little bit more mellow in this video. Enjoy the audiobook. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of My Fanfiction Audiobook, aka I still don't have a proper mic, but I'm gonna narrate to you all anyways. Hi there, I'm Sonja, and I write, and today it's raining. Which makes perfect weather for enjoying my week's... Which makes perfect weather for enjoying this week's episode of My Fanfiction Audiobook, episode 5. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Sonja, and I'm writing a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fan fiction on Wattpad called Guilty Conscience, and I'm narrating it here on YouTube in this sort of audiobook style, if you will. Why? Because I'm cray-cray. If any of that sounds interesting to you, you can head into my channel and look under the My Fanfiction Audiobook playlist, where all of the episodes for this series are stored in chronological order. And without further ado, thank you guys so much for all the support I receive on both Wattpad and on YouTube. I appreciate it so much, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode of My Fanfiction Audiobook, Episode 5, where I'm reading Chapter 3, The Interrogation, Part 2. The bathroom was larger than she expected. Wyan walked several paces behind Bucciarati and Abbacchio as they made their way down the long, white-tiled hallway. Small lights let off a warm glow above her head, and for every step she took further into the restroom, the louder the groaning became. The mobsters rounded a sharp corner and disappeared behind a white wall. Wyan slowed her pace, taking a moment to breathe before laying eyes upon whatever sat beyond that corner. Whimpers of pain echoed louder as she got closer to the white wall, but Wyan stopped in her tracks when she heard the sharp whine of metal scraping metal. Someone had pulled out a pocket knife, and from the way the metal grinded against itself, she could tell it was large. The sudden pull of hesitation held her back, and Wyan didn't think she was ready to see someone be gutted like a pig, let alone someone she knew. She moved to take a step back toward the bathroom's entrance, but found herself pinned under Abbacchio's gaze when he rounded the corner to face her. He must have seen the unease in her eyes as he huffed a sigh and moved toward her. "It'll be fine," was all he mumbled before grabbing Wyan by the shoulder and pulling her into the bathroom. The walls were clad in black and white tiles to complement the golden accents on the sink and stall doors. Everything was so clean. Even the urinals were tidy, though at the very back of the long hall of toilets and sinks there was a rather large mess. The Viper. Galstov hung limply as his arms and legs were strung to a stall door. A black piece of fabric had been stuffed into his mouth. His hair was tattered and slick with sweat, and the man had been completely stripped save for the bright yellow underwear that lay clinging to his sweat-covered body. As Abbacchio's hand remained on her shoulder, guiding Wyan closer to the backstabber that Narancia and Fugo had strung up so skillfully to that bathroom stall, she noticed a pool of black fabric spilling from one of the toilets. So they really did try to flush his clothes, huh? She was about to laugh. The thought of the two boys trying to shovel the clothes into the toilet was quite amusing, but all humor left when she got a closer look at Galstov. His bare chest and thighs were riddled with slender lacerations. His skin had been cut, but the divots remained shallow, enough to make his body tingle with pain, but not enough to make him bleed out. They wouldn't scar, but they definitely stung. Patches of his skin was flush, and yet his face was utterly pale. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Narancia and Fugo, although seemingly normal teenage boys, clearly meant business when it came to interrogations, and unfortunately for Galstov, Bucciarati and Abbacchio had come for more answers. "Take out the gag, Abbacchio," Bucciarati instructed, setting his silver pocket knife on the rim of a sink. Leaning back on the counter, the leader of the Bodyguard Squad watched as Abacchio abandoned Wyann's shoulder to remove the black felt that was shoveled into the viper's mouth. With a single tug, the cloth fell from Galstov's mouth, and in that same instant, the viper sent a wad of spit into Abacchio's face. Wyann gasped. The last thing she expected from Galstov was for him to be so daring, especially in his current state of undress. Bucciarati shook his head, placing a hand on Wyann's elbow and pulling her from where Abacchio stood and closer to the sink where he sat. There was at least 10 feet between the stalls and the sinks, and from the gentle way that the boss had pulled her back, Wyann knew that something interesting was bound to happen. Abacchio reached into one of the vacant stalls and wiped his face off with a handful of toilet paper. Galstov erupted with laughter, swinging his head from side to side while the tall mafioso discarded the spit-covered tissue. But Galstov's cockiness was cut short when Abacchio swung fast and hard into his jaw, and then into his stomach, and then into his nose, and then into his face one more time. "All done?" Bucciarati asked, standing from the sink. Abacchio nodded and stalked silently to the sinks where his boss stood. His feet didn't lift off from the ground as he placed himself on the cool marble, leaning back to rest his palms on the stone. Wyann stood to his right. She remained out of the mobster's way, but close enough to be a part of their ordeal. Blood that wasn't his own dripped down from Abacchio's knuckles. Galstov's smile had vanished. His laughter ceased the moment that Abacchio struck him, and now it was Abacchio's turn to laugh. He chuckled softly as Bucciarati stepped closer to the viper's slack figure. "I won't talk," he wheezed out between labored breaths. "You haven't even let me ask you a question, Mr. Brutta." Bucciarati stalked around the restrained man like a cat would to a mouse. He was the embodiment of calm while Galstov began to shake. Out of fear or fatigue? Wyann couldn't tell, but she had a sneaking suspicion that it was both. "I don't care," he hissed. "I'm not talking, so buzz off." "You seem to be familiar with my dear companion, Wyann. Aren't you concerned that she may have some information on you that you may not be so inclined as to share?" Blackmail. That's why Wyann had to be present for the interrogation. She knew very little about the Viper's personal life and his dealings in the mafia, but leading him to believe that she might have some dirt on his name could be the pushing force that the Bodyguard Squad needed to get him to speak. Galstov seemed to stop breathing. He had gone entirely too still. The silence in the bathroom was deafening. He looked to her for the first time, and as if by instinct, Wyann smiled. No one spoke or moved for what felt like many long minutes as Galstov's face grew even paler than before. He shook his head. "What did you tell them?" he barked. "Some very distasteful truths," Bucciarati mused. "That's all." His bluff held strong when Galstov shook harder. "Really, it took nothing to get her to talk," he continued. "You traitor," the Viper bellowed. "I can't believe you've done this." "I know. I can't believe she told us either," Bucciarati chuckled, picking an invisible speck of dirt off his suit. I swear," Galstov pleaded. "Passione was screwing me over. I didn't have any money. This is only my second job of betrayal." It seemed that Bucciarati's plan worked much better than anyone could have anticipated. He smiled and cocked his head as the Viper spilled the truth. "Really?" Bucciarati asked. "Because my friend Wyann told me otherwise. We know you've taken on a few more jobs against the organization than you're letting on." Hey. Galstov whimpered. You seriously can't count the drug deal as betrayal, right? Passione deals to kids all the time. So how is it any different if I do it too, eh? The restroom went utterly silent. YN figured that Galstov was a fool, but she never knew he was this big of an idiot. She couldn't tell what anyone else was thinking, but when Abbacchio leaned over to pass Bucciarati his knife, YN knew that what he had said, what Galstov spilled, clearly rubbed both Abbacchio and Bucciarati in all kinds of wrong ways. Hey! You did it! Thank you so much for sticking around all the way to the end. And stay tuned for next week's episode where I will be concluding Chapter 3 of this series and we'll be moving on to Chapter 4. I can't wait to see you all there. Bye!